Well, folks, it's not even October, and we're already getting the very convenient news stories to try and resurrect the Kamala Harris campaign. Honestly, both of these are things that I thought would have been reserved for October, but, maybe they want to start building momentum, start trying to change the tide a little earlier, and come out with these pro-Kamala surprises. The first one being, of course, the school shooting in Georgia yesterday. This came, was it less than a week after we finally got the manifesto for the trans shooter in Nashville from, was it last year? And we got to see in the manifesto how they were completely motivated to murder these children because they were being raised in a Christian environment, and how that's no good, very bad, and how in order to make the world safe for transgenderism, it's necessary and proper to eliminate normal people from the planet. And so right after that comes out, and that wasn't gaining much steam as a narrative. A lot of people were talking about it. It was being largely ignored, completely ignored by the media, and conservative media didn't want to talk about it. It was icky to them. They didn't want to do that. Then we get this shooter yesterday, who could not have a more perfect name. Okay, first of all, we get a school shooting. This is supposed to be a win for Democrats because, of course, gun control, very important. Republicans, they won't take away the guns as much as Democrats do. They do take away guns. Republicans have a long history of that, but they won't do it as much as the Democrats want. So the Democrats use that as a cudgel, and they beat Republicans over the head with it during election time. And so not only was there a school shooting, but it was a school shooting in a swing state in Georgia. Now there's going to be a big push, pressure on the Republican government, which is pretty squishy in Georgia, say, oh my gosh, you have to take away the guns now, even though the shooter was a 14-year-old who legally can't own a gun. But that doesn't matter. We need to take all the guns away, and this will create a positive narrative for Democrats in a swing state 2 months before the election. Now, honestly, I think the news cycle moves so fast that not a lot of people will be thinking about this by the time Election Day rolls around, but I would think in the state of Georgia this will still be fresh in people's minds. And so in that state, I think that this story will have an impact. And obviously, Donald Trump has nothing to do with a school shooting. But these are just things that, like, in people's minds, if they're thinking like that, if they're in the bleeding heart mindset, they're going to be less inclined to vote for someone who's boisterous and aggressive like Trump. Now, the second issue with this school shooting, third issue, I guess, is his name. The shooter's name was Colt Gray, about the most right-wing name I could think of. Colt Gray is like the name of a color. It's like the color of the original AR-15. People call that Colt Gray because they were made by Colt. Well, not the earliest AR-15s, but the one that most people think of, the ones from the 1960s, from the Vietnam War that you've seen in all the movies, like Platoon or what's his name, the Tom Hanks thing, Forrest Gump. You know what I'm talking about. You know that M16 AR-15, that look. That's Colt Gray. And that was the school shooter's name. And yes, he used an AR-15, though I don't believe it was one that was Colt Gray colored. So anyway, we have a 14-year-old white male in Georgia who shot disabled children. He shot disabled kids, kids his age, apparently. He went into the special needs classroom and shot him up. And so this is just, perfectly coded for the media to label this as right-wing extremism, and they're going to come up with some narrative once we know a little bit more about how Trump caused this. However, there may be a little bit of a stick in this, and we got the mugshot just a few minutes ago, right before I started recording, and took a look at it, and the kid's got long hair, and he bleached it, so it kind of looks like it's on flames, because like around the crown of his head it's still dark hair, but then like the long part is all bleached blonde. And so I think he looks kind of like a delinquent, but some people, just anytime you have a man with long hair now, people interpret that as being transgendered. It means you're a woman now. And so there might be a narrative building. People just try and argue this is another trans shooter. Maybe, who's just mad at society because they're a misfit and they don't fit in. This kid, apparently this was his first full day at this school. He just transferred. He was a mysterious transfer student. And so in all seriousness, I mean, this was just, another Looney Tune who decided to go postal. I mean, to me, and almost certainly is not like some kind of act of political terrorism. It seems to be a 14-year-old who's mad at the world. That would be the most likely outcome. And this really isn't connected to our politics, but that's not how America works. This is, of course, going to be connected to our politics. Now, the kid, as is always the case, was known to the FBI, and had been interviewed by, I think, local police last year. So as a 13-year-old, I guess he was posting things that were spicy enough online that the local police interrogated him. So it sounds like this has been building for a while, and I mean, the one student who was interviewed by, I think it was CNN or CBS or something, said, like, yeah, I'm not surprised that he went and shot a bunch of people. This is kind of to be expected. And so this was like the first big story that should help Kamala, who's, not doing very well in the polls relative to how she should be doing, relative to how Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton were doing at this point in the race. But then later that day, we got a breaking story that apparently Tim Pool is a Russian puppet who is being paid by the Russians. At least that's what the headlines seem to depict. I don't want Tim Pool to sue me for defamation, so I'm not saying that, Tim. But in actuality, what the DOJ is alleging is that Lauren Chen and her husband have a company called Tenant Media. I've heard the name. I don't think I've ever watched anything that was like branded that, but I've heard the name. Of course, know who Lauren Chen is. So she and her husband are accused of taking $10 million from Russia to be pro-Russian. And then, of course, anyone who's tied to them, is kind of being smeared as a Russian bot. Anyone who is financially tied to Lauren Chen and her husband, whatever his name may be. Now, since she didn't take his name, we will never know what his name is. I don't know. I don't care enough to look it up. But I don't think that I'm going to cause much controversy with the audience of, the very, very small audience of this channel by saying this. But frankly, I don't care if they took $10 million from Russia. If they were able to get $10 million from the Ruskies, good for them. Now, we do have the Foreign Agent Registration Act, and I do think that it would be ideal if foreign agents registered. If you are a paid shill for a foreign country, we do have that law. It would be nice if everyone followed that, but, we know that people don't. There's a lot of people who don't. We know there's a lot of people who have dual loyalty with other countries. Most notably countries that aren't Russia. Countries like certain Middle Eastern countries, multiple Middle Eastern countries. So I'm not just talking about the one you're thinking of. There are other Middle Eastern countries. Probably about 3 big ones. There's also a very prominent European country. Has a lot of under-the-table foreign agents in this country who are not registered. Some of which have been prosecuted in the past. But in the case of Mrs. Chen, I think clearly this is just a case of taking flack because you're over the target. I don't listen to her, never have. I remember the first time I saw like something featuring her. She was like very young and long before she was married, and just thinking like, oh, another vapid, young woman who's trying to grift off of talking about politics. Boring. It was like also around the same time as the early days of Lauren Southern and who's that other one? Faith Gouldy. So like Lauren Chen was the more moderate and acceptable. She wasn't as crazy as those other two really conservative Canadian women. All three of them Canadian, actually, strangely enough. But anyway, over the years, Lauren Chen, I guess, has gotten more based, and so good for her. If she was able to finagle $10 million away from the Ruskies, and all the same time improve her views, I'm all for that. And the last thing that I believe is that she and her husband should be thrown in prison and have their young children taken away. I think that is not good for society. I don't know if that's what's going to happen, but that's what I would imagine is going to happen. Seems that everyone around them has disavowed Lauren Chen and cut ties with her. She's fired from the Blaze. Benny Johnson says he's disgusted, and it's like, well, Benny Johnson always got. Actually, I have to say, I always thought that I would put someone like Lauren Chen in the same category as Benny Johnson, like in my mind up until now. It's only because now that she's being charged by the DOJ that I go, oh, maybe she actually believes some stuff, because if she really was just a shill, if she was just a gun for hire, like those, you can just compromise those people, like flip them. And of course, we all know how this is going to be used. This is this case is being used, like the FBI is arguing in their filings that the examples of Russian propaganda are complaining about the U.S. having too much immigration or complaining about inflation being too high. Very normal domestic issues. You see, that actually helps Russian interests because that causes division, because it makes it makes Joe Biden's approval rating goes down. And that helps Russia, actually, when Americans are unhappy about inflation and immigration. And you see, it would be much better for America and much worse for Russia if Americans just loved mass immigration and spiraling inflation. So yeah, I have contempt for the Department of Justice and no respect for them. This is not like a country where you have rule of law. It's entire, especially at the federal level, like law enforcement is almost entirely political. Right down to the, the most horrifying crimes imaginable. Remember the brother of the Vegas shooter, and how he was immediately charged, right? Like, just coincidentally, the day after the Vegas shooting, his brother happened to be charged with, how should I say this? Underage lewdness, pictures, videos, whatever, on his hard drive, and everybody's like, oh, he knew too much, they had to take him out. Like, it was obvious. Like, that's how the legal system is used. The legal system is used to silence people. That is what federal law enforcement is all about. They might arrest some real criminals here and there, but they're not arresting the biggest criminals. They'd be arresting middlemen in criminal organizations, or they're just arresting the criminals who refused to pay them off, who refused to bribe them. Or scorned ex-lovers like what was his name? The president of Panama, Manuel Noriega, a loyal stooge for American intelligence, who was a part of the drug trade and an integral part of it, helping to fund American activities in the Western Hemisphere. As soon as he outlived his usefulness, they did away with him. Same thing with Saddam Hussein. He was hung out to dry. He was a loyal American ally. He played his part. He was happy to do the deals, to work with the U.S. Late stage, Muammar Gaddafi, late in life, same thing, same story. Gave up his weapons of mass destruction, said, I just want to be peaceful. I want everyone to be my friend. And what did he get for it? He was sodomized to death by American goons. And so when I think about that, forgive me if I just can't be bothered by $10 million in money coming from Russia to prop up like some social media influencer who I don't even listen to or watch. But of course, this is just Russia Collusion 3.0 or 4.0 or 5.0, wherever the hell we're on. I don't know how much juice there really is to squeeze out of this. I mean, I think people are pretty tired of Russia Collusion. Maybe this will help animate, like, Democrat voters. I don't know. Tim Pool appeared to be having a little fun with it. He changed his profile and put on Twitter and put in like an Israeli and Ukrainian flag, to show like, oh, I've switched sides now that I'm no longer being paid by Russia. And he was like, I'm pro-war now. We need to fund Ukraine and Israel. It's like, I mean, some people were so deranged that they actually bought into that, and they're like, oh my God, look, Tim Pool has flipped. He's betrayed us now because he's so afraid of being associated with Russia. It's like, no, you goons. He's clearly just being silly. So anyway, I hope that Lauren and her husband are pardoned by Senor Trump if he is able to somehow persevere this fall and retake the White House. Trump has made a lot of promises, most of which I don't see him keeping. I didn't trust Trump in 2016, and I have to say, I trust him much more now than I did in 2016. In 2016, I thought it was a total fraud. In 2024, I think that he's a BSer and a people pleaser, and he will tell you what you want to hear, at any particular time. But that's not necessarily indicative of his future behaviors. And so you just got to roll with the punches where he's concerned. So he's not a total fraud, but he's also not, I almost said Honest Abe. I'm very glad he's not Honest Abe. He's much better than so-called Honest Abe. Honest Abe was a genocidal maniac. Trump is not that bad, but he could be a lot better. So anyway, with that said, I will see you folks back here in the next one.